Alright, what's going on, you guys? So I've been getting a lot of work done on my Kyosho Madforce. Madforce has always been one of my favorite solid axle monster trucks other than the Cloudbuster. So if you take a look, this thing's starting to come together quite nicely. It's really starting to look like a monster truck. Just kidding, that was just a joke. It's supposed to be funny. If you take a look, it's just a pile of parts. Alright, so here's the upgraded Madforce chassis and suspension. So basically what happened was I ran my Madforce hard for years and everything was pretty beat on it, and I was doing a rebuild, and a lot of the original Madforce parts are starting to get hard to get because Mad Crusher's out and the Madforce is discontinued. So some of the parts are hard to get. So I thought about switching over to the Mad Crusher style suspension, which is a 4-link, or technically a 5-link because it has a panhard bar, or also known as a track bar. And I don't really like that style of suspension too much. It's okay on a trail truck, but not really a monster truck. A monster truck should have a triangulated 4-link, well, uppers triangulated. So this chassis right here is a CPE Gauntlet for a Cloudbuster. So I ordered this thing from CPE a while ago. It took a couple months to come in, I don't know why. But anyway, it took a while. So in the meantime, I ended up building a custom chassis for the Cloudbuster because it was for a customer, and I don't like to leave people hanging. So this thing eventually showed up, and I'm like, what am I going to do with that now? And I started looking, I was like, you know what, I bet you I can make that thing work on the Madforce because it's got a bunch of different suspension options. And overall, the dimensions of this chassis are pretty close to the Madforce one. Take a look. It's really about the same length minus the front bumper and the wheelie bar, but overall it's the same length and almost the same width. And I could have ran these stock style suspension arms, but then it really wouldn't be much of an upgrade. It would just be a Madforce with a fancy looking chassis. So I really wanted to upgrade the suspension. And then I remembered I was watching a video from XOKJRC, and I saw these axles he did. So these are just like his. So these are factory Kyosho Madforce axles, but normally one side's a lot longer than the other. So I just cut this inner axle tube and that narrowed it, so now they're both the same length, so they'll use the same axle shaft on both sides. And I bought these the centerpiece, which is the upper link mount, and then the outer shock mount, which has a lower link mount, and those are from Freestyle RC. So again, I gotta thank XOKJRC, awesome channel. I never would have known about that if it wasn't for him. And these are the stock Madforce shocks. I just got to make little spacers, which I already started doing to keep them at the right angle. These suspension links are the one that came with the CPE chassis kit. And what's cool about the setup is you can loosen this and rotate these housings and give you like different pinion angles. So it's got some good adjustment. With all these adjustments right here, you can really fine tune the suspension. I think though, I might have to shorten these upper links a little bit and probably upgrade these shocks, change them around a little bit. We'll see how it goes when I get it running. So for motor and transmission, I decided to keep the original Madforce motor and transmission because this motor is plenty powerful, 2100 kV. Transmission is simple, it's easy to work on, it's got a nice slipper clutch, chain driven, it's been crazy durable. This thing's never had any problems. In fact, I don't know anybody that I know personally who's had any Madforce transmission issues. So it was a definite must that I would keep this thing in the Madforce. Only problem I ran into is mounting it. So originally, this aluminum piece was huge. It came out to here. It was about the size of a cell phone. So it was good size. So if you take a look at these bolts, I milled all around the bolts. So I took off all the material that wasn't needed. So all the mounts can still bolt in that are factory, but it'll fit between the new chassis. So on the Madforce, because the factory had one long axle tube and one short, these drive cups right here were offset. So the differential was also offset, so it sat more on the side, but because I narrowed everything, I wanted to sit in the center. So there's also this aluminum plate right here, which originally was a lot bigger. This came with the CPE chassis, but I milled it out right here and all around here and cut it. So now that this piece fits right in there and it's centered. But the problem is there's no mounts in there. It's just kind of floating in the breeze. So I spent some time coming up with a good design on how to mount this. I didn't want to drill any extra holes or modify this chassis whatsoever because I wanted this to be all bolt together kit. In case somebody watching this video wants to do the same thing, I could just make them up some pieces. So I looked at all my options on the chassis, but also on the engine transmission plate. So I came up with a pretty good design. I drilled one hole here, and then I made up these pieces right here. There's two spacers and these other two pieces. So the longer piece is drilled and tapped at each end, and then I machined a little flat right there, and that's for a screw to go through. So altogether, there's 6 screws that hold the motor and transmission to the chassis. So you take one of the Allen screws, you put it right through there, and that's why I machined the flat, so it sits nice and flat. This piece has like a little fish mouth, so it sits nice and flush right there. And then you just thread this piece in. And these pieces are made out of 70-75 aluminum, so they're very strong. It's one of the strongest aluminums. So I just put that hand tight for now. And then the transmission sits way down there. So this piece bolts up to that hole. And the bottom goes right there. So it makes almost like a T shape. So it ties the motor, transmission, chassis together. So first I'll bolt this in here. And again, I leave these hand tight until the whole assembly is together. Same thing with the other side. I bolt the other side in. So now I'll flip it over. And that gives me access to that bolt hole right there. It's really easy. And so now all I have to do is put in the side bolts. And for the side bolts, that's what these spacers are for. And when coming up with a mounting location, I really didn't want to drill any holes in this chassis because I wanted to make it so like if somebody wanted to duplicate this build, they could just reach out to me and I can easily make them up these pieces. It's simple. It'll only take me like 10 minutes to make these pieces. So looking right here at CPE, the top of the P, it's slotted right there and it's perfectly in line with it's square with the chassis, so that'll give some good adjustment if needed. So those are actually, out of all of them, kind of a little tricky to get in, but they're not too bad. Once you get one started, the other one's really easy. So now I got all the screws right in here and they're all pretty much just hand tight. But you can see where all the mounts go, and already just being hand tight, this thing's already real solid. So now I'll just go through and I'll tighten the T-bar first. Part of the reason I made these pieces out of 70-75 is when you cut threads in 70-75, you're way less likely to strip the threads. And right here is a screw on the bottom of the motor plate. Snug that up. So now the motor is secure top to bottom. So now I just tighten these ones on the side. And now this motor's nice and solid in there. It's really strong. Chassis is way stronger too because anytime you add a cross member like this, crossbar, it makes it way more rigid. So not only do these mount the engine and transmission, but it also strengthens the chassis significantly. So now all I have left to do is make the lower shock mounts. And right here are the drive shafts. So the front one fits, and then the back one uses the same as the front. So I just got to order another front drive shaft. And then I have a short shaft on each side of the axle. So I'll either just get another short shaft or cut and shorten the factory Madforce. Or I remember in the Axle Cage RC video where he did about these axles, he mentioned often ones. So maybe I'll reach out to him, or if any of you guys know about those, let me know. But until next time, take care. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. In the next video, I'll have this thing running.